have Diane Mundy, who is going to be our lead guest in tackling some of the topics that we have. And then we have Richard Moth, again, our key speaker of the day. And then Blaise Mwangi is also going to be our speaker of the day. And myself, I'm Naima Kasim. I'm going to moderate this webinar, and I hope we are going to benefit and participate to the fullest. To our audience outside there, we know the topic of the day is the role of active learning and supportive relationships in competency-based curriculum. We have a new curriculum right now, and this curriculum is different from what we had before. It is quite different from the content-based or objective-based curriculum, which we have been studying or we're still studying under 844. Competence-based curriculum has got a lot of requirements, and would like to know what it takes for the teacher to deliver this curriculum properly, and what it takes for the parent, the guardian, or the caregiver to support the learner or the child so that they can acquire enough knowledge or knowledge that they need to acquire, develop the skills that they need to develop, and at the same time, grow and develop themselves emotionally and mentally, so that at the end of it all, we have a well-nurtured and empowered citizen that can handle the challenges of life. So to kick us off, I'd like to give you a preview of what we are going to discuss. We have divided this session into three. To begin with, we are going to look at the social or emotional development of a learner or a child. And under this, we are going to look at how we can support our learner or our child in order for them to form the necessary relations with the parents at home, or with the teachers, or with the people in society, and how these relationships can help them and support them in learning. And then we shall look at cognitive development, or the development of knowledge in a learner or a child. What does a child require in order to develop the knowledge and the skills that they are taught at school or taught at home, and so on? So under that topic, we're going to look at how we can increase, as parents, as teachers, and as caregivers, how we can support this child or this learner to increase the knowledge best, or how they understand the concepts that they learn at school, at home, and even in society. And then we are going to look at differentiated learning. Under this, we know that learners have different learning abilities, and they have got different learning preferences. So as a teacher or as a parent and caregiver, we need to understand our learners and provide the necessary resources that will enable them learn properly. And therefore, before we move further, I would like to invite the speakers of the day to say hi to us before we can delve into the matter. Diane, kindly greet our audience.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a privilege to be on this forum, to be on this platform. And I know we're going to have a good time of exploring and learning together. Naima may have mentioned we also encourage your participation. I believe there's a Q&A open, there's a chat open, or even on Facebook, you can send your comments, questions, because as in any context, it's going to be much more effective if we hear from you and we know what you're interested in talking about, hearing about, learning about, discussing together. And I'm sure we'll have a very good afternoon. So it's a privilege to be with you. And yeah, let's go for it.
Thank you, Diane. Richard.
Good afternoon, our viewers. Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be part of the great team. We have a lot in store, and we will be learning more also from your end. So it's going to be a mutual learning. We'll be doing bits of presentation, and as Diane and Naima had mentioned, it is a participatory approach. So feel free, feel most welcome. Thank you so much.
Blaise.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you. I'm happy to join these brilliant brains because today we have an interesting topic. We want to understand more about active learning and supportive relationship. And I'm sure the big team will be able to help us understand this in depth and help our parents, our teachers, our caregivers, an opportunity to ensure that our children grow up the way they are supposed to grow, particularly in matters to do with education. Karibuni.
Thank you. Okay, our viewers and listeners, you have heard from our guests this afternoon. Just to make you comfortable, Diane Omondi is an author and she's so much talented in writing for pre-primary and teacher education. So you are there, you are a teacher, you are a parent, kindly let us make this session interactive because we are dealing with active learning. Richard Moss is a trainer of trainers, and he's also an author, qualified and experienced in writing for pre-primary learners. And he is also a trainer of teachers of pre-primary school. And so feel privileged to hear from us or from him, and also to ask him so many questions that are bothering you. Blaise Mwangi is a teacher by training, and his main profession is dealing with the teachers, interacting with the teachers and students. So write your questions, text us on our chat wall, and we shall be there to answer your questions. So welcome, and we would like to kick off. And as Diane mentioned, this is a live session. We are here to respond to you. We are here to hear from you. So feel free to text in, to call in, to write on our chat, and we are going to respond to you, contribute to what we are discussing, and eventually we shall have a productive afternoon. Now, I would like us to go to our first session. And here we are going to look at how to develop our children emotionally and socially. And I would like our two guests, Diane and Richard, to give us more information about how we can support our children in developing emotionally and socially. And before we go further, I would like us to define our topic of the day, because we are talking about the role of active learning and supportive relationship. And therefore, just ask Diane to explain to us what it means, what this topic means, what is active learning, Diane, and what is supportive relationships that we need to engage our learners in, and how can we explain to our listeners what relationships or what attachment is, so that eventually we'll have a parent or a teacher who can support this learner properly. Diane, kindly take us on.
Apologies. Sorry for that. Thank you, Naima, for this opportunity. Active learning is really being involved in learning. It might be being involved with physical movement, action. One of the things that we would want to understand to really appreciate the importance of active learning is how the brain works. And particularly the brain in a young child is very, very susceptible, or it's very busy creating all of the links and connections that are needed for brain development. And those links and connections are created as a child is stimulated, is active, is doing, is hearing and seeing and speaking and, well, using all the senses really. So all of those things are involved in active learning, but it's more than just movement, or it's more than just, well, going up and down or using the hands or using the senses. I just put a brief definition here that active learning is a technique that involves learners in doing, they're involved in doing and thinking about the things they are doing. So there's process of inquiry, processes of discovery. Active learning is different from passive learning in the sense that a passive learning, I'm sitting and I'm listening. Like now, right now, you're sitting and listening to me, unfortunately. That you're learning passively, but as we participate together, as we discuss together, you will also be active in the learning. So that's what we want to encourage children, so that learners have the opportunity to talk about, to think about, to discuss, to process, to really understand for themselves, working in pairs, working in groups, doing with their hands, particularly for the younger learners. And that's what we mean by active learning. It's just as a basic introduction. You also asked several questions. You asked about supportive relationships. Yeah. And I think supportive relationships, we understand to be those relationships that give us emotional security, that give us a sense of, just safety in our environment. And these are very important relationships. We talk about attachment. Attachment is usually it's considered to be one or a few specific key relationships that are developed. John Bowlby was a well-known theorist in regard to attachment. And he talks about this emotional bond, the connection that you have with someone. Now, Bowlby spoke about it specifically in relation to mother and child, but this can be applied across the board with any caregiver, caregivers, siblings, family members, extended family. And what we want to say today is also teachers can form attachments with children. And these attachments, they're established through spending time together, through communicating, talking. They provide that security that a child needs for optimum learning. Now, we might wonder, what does emotional have to do with intellectual? What does how I feel, whether I feel happy and loved, what does that have to do with how well I can learn? I think as we go along, we'll be able to recognize that it actually has a lot to do with how effective or how well children can really optimize their potential even in the intellectual environment. So that's just basic definitions, I think, is what you wanted to start with.
Okay, thank you, Diane. So I'm sure our listener, our viewer this afternoon has understood that by active learning, we just mean learning through doing. And learning through doing is very, very productive when the people around us or when we form a bond with the people that are supporting us in doing that. Thank you so much. Now, Moth or Pritchard.
Yes.
Let us come to you. Maybe you could explain to our viewers. Diane has told us about emotional or formation of attachment with the people that are around the learner. Now, does the environment that learners exist in, that is the home environment and the school environment, do these environments really affect how effective a learner learns? And if so, does this attachment or these attachments that the children form, do they really contribute to the eventual or the ultimate intellectual development of a child? If the environment around the child, the relationships are good, will this child's knowledge development become good at the same time? Kindly.
Thank you so much, Naima, for that. And thank you so much, Dan, for the introductory part. The domains of child growth and development are interrelated. And to bring on point, social and emotional development are very key in terms of determining the intellectual capacity of a child. Looking at the home environment, for instance, a stimulative home environment aids in developing the intellectual aspect in the sense that we usually talk about early stimulation in early childhood, aspects that caregivers who interact on a day-to-day basis form together with the children under their care would actually enhance the rate in which their brain develops. I'll use an example. A parent who sings for the younger child, it means that the child and the parent have formed a a secure attachment. That's what enhances the singing bit of it. That child would actually acquire a higher rate of language home environment that is not emotional aspect bit of it, all children grow and develop. When the emotional status of the environment is very conducive and able to support learning, then the children in that particular level succeed even beyond the normal classroom situation. So unless there is a rejoinder, then I'll be willing to explain more. But for now, thank you.
Yeah, Richard, I think I love your presentation. Thank you, Moth. Just for emphasis, because I thought this is interesting. You have said that the environment plays a big role in the development, academic environment of that child. And I'm trying to imagine a child. Does it mean that a child who was born in a slum, for example, has any difference with a child who has been born in an affluent background? Say, a child born in the slums in Kenya and another one born in the leafy suburbs of Nairobi. Does that mean that one is disadvantaged over the other?
Thank you so much, Blaise. We usually talk about nature versus nurture in child growth and development. So the natural setting, if a child is born in a slum area and the caregivers within the slum area are already trained to enhance early stimulation, it will not have any difference with the child born in a leafy suburb, provided they get early stimulation together. But if either the one in the leafy suburb, the interaction between that particular child and the caregiver lacks, then you may find that the child born in urban slums would actually have a higher brain, social, and emotional development as opposed to the one born in the leafy suburb. So the key or the bare minimum here is early stimulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if I could just add some, sorry, if I could just add,
Yes.
thank you very much, Moth, for that. If a child in the urban slums is given the opportunity to play outside, of course, there could be security concerns, there could be sanitation concerns, which need to be considered. But if they're playing, they're pushing a wheel, a tire, or creating something out of caps and wires, they might actually have a much greater opportunity than the one in the suburb who's sitting behind a computer or kept protected. I mean, we should not think that that some of these things, the definitions of a rich environment, aren't what we usually think of them as being. An environment can be very rich and active in any of those economic contexts, or it can be otherwise, actually.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for bringing to our attention about how the social and emotional environment supports the intellectual development of a child. Now, we're talking about the social relationships, the emotional relationships that surround a child. And I would just like to ask Diane to explain to us who has the responsibility of ensuring that there are these healthy relationships around this child. And is it actually true that a child can learn better when he or she is in a healthy social and emotional environment? I know that has been touched a little by Moth, but kindly just explain to our listeners about the role of a healthy social and emotional environment to a child's development.
Thank you, Naima. Your first question was who is responsible?
Yes, because it's
yes, who is responsible? I mean,
yeah.
We know that the first responsibility would lie with parents,
yes,
to establish that solid, secure, healthy environment, social and emotional environment for a child. there are situations, unfortunately, where parents might not be able to provide that, or even the caregiver might not be providing that. And it's not, I think in the classroom setting or as teachers, we're not completely off the hook in terms of helping to provide, because as much as those relationships are first found or should be first found in the home, particularly in instances where they might not be found in the home, then the next the next mandate, okay, we could say it's with the community, extended family, perhaps the religious community. But as teachers, we should also know that it is within our mandate to provide what we can in terms of social, rich social environment, acceptance, emotional support for any learner who we're having in our classes or in our care. So it's the parents' responsibility, it's the community's responsibility, it's all of our responsibility, really. Anyone who's interacting with a child, and particularly if we're noticing that there is a lack or there is something that might not be quite right or that they're not getting that they need, I think it's our responsibility as responsible adults to really fill in where we can. Now, after that, I've almost forgotten your second part of the question. Oh, we're talking about how social and emotional environment influences intellectual development. You know, we use the term holistic development a lot, and I think the word holistic is flashed around. It's printed on a lot of literature these days. Holistic really, we like to think of it as 7 primary areas of development: physical, spiritual and moral, intellectual, linguistic, social and emotional. Now, social and emotional doesn't need to be at the end. It's just that in the teaching that I've been doing, we use the acronym SMILES, like PSMILES. So that's why emotional and social are coming at the end. But each of these aspects of development are interrelated. They're like the fingers on our hand. Yes, we have separate fingers on our hand, but they're all joined together. So yes, social, emotional health definitely does have an influence on intellectual development. If a child is traumatized because of arguments that they've heard going on at home, or if a child doubts whether they even worthwhile as a human being, perhaps because of the way that they've been handled, because of inappropriate, responses to the child. If a child has been neglected, they're likely to feel like they're really not worth anything or not being loved. That will affect a child's confidence. That will affect a child's ability to concentrate, because if they're thinking about the things that are happening at home and worried about something that they might encounter when they leave school and go back home, those things definitely will affect a child's intellectual development. And conversely, when they grow in that atmosphere of security, of knowing I am loved, I'm good, I'm a worthy person, I'm okay, they'll have the confidence and the ability to concentrate and just really excel intellectually. So these areas of development are interrelated. We could give so many examples of the linguistic area, of course, sometimes the traditional education, unfortunately, doesn't put as much emphasis on moral development. That's also very important. And I believe in the CBC, we have more of that emphasis coming in. But each of these areas, including physical, including intellectual, social, emotional, they link together to produce a holistic product or a holistic result in terms of learning and development.
So then can we say that a happy child learns better than a child who is not happy? Yeah.
I think as a general rule, sure.
Okay, now maybe we could, you could tell us whether there are actually factors that can influence the development of these relationships or these attachments. Are there some factors, or are there things that we need to do in order to develop our attachment with our learners or our children in that case?
Sure, sure. There are many things that we can do as caregivers, as adults, as teachers, that will influence the development of these relationships. Maybe if we just start in a home context with parents, it's about being consistent. It's about being accurate. Like if I'm looking here at the column on the right of this slide, because not all attachments are necessarily the healthy ones. Not all attachments are secure, but I don't think we have time to go into different types of attachments. But let's assume that we're talking about the secure attachment, the healthy attachment, the one that really gives a child that sense of, yeah, I'm safe, I'm okay, I'm a good person. So then we need to be, that what we do as adults to promote that is to be quick to respond. Now, we're not talking about a quote unquote spoiled child who, you know, lifts a finger and everybody comes dancing around them. What do you want? But we're talking about the early years, the first year of life, the second year of life, when a child cries or reaches out in some way for help. They need a response. They need that loving and affectionate response. Consistency and routine are also very important. These are things that we might not think are that important in life, but for a child to know what they should expect. If I behave in such a way, this will be the result. If I behave in such a way, this will be the result. Sometimes, you know, today you can get away with something and tomorrow you get beaten for it. That doesn't help a child to know what to expect or to feel secure, to develop that attachment. Of course, they need appropriate freedom. They need to be able to explore. Love, care, affection will be expressed in many ways, and just being present. I personally know that many times as a young mother, I was physically present, but not emotionally present. You know, you're there and the child is talking to you and like, yeah. And if you're asked to say, what did we just say? That you wouldn't be able to say it because you're not really there. So being there, they talk about time, quality time. Quality time is important, but time is also important. So you can have 5 minutes of quality time and maybe an hour of just time. They might be just as important. You know, I think what most of these things we've said, if we move that to an academic setting, we look at fostering secure attachments in the classroom, it would be very similar then, similar responses, consistency, routine. Maybe the child knows when I come to school, when we start class, we're going to sing such and such a song. And when I go home, we're going to do such and such a goodbye routine, just little things that we can do. Of course, being sensitive, multi-age groups, when you have children of different groups together, where possible, I know it's not possible in many academic settings, but where possible, that helps to just engender a sense of, you know, it's more natural, because in a family, you don't have 10 3-year-olds all in the home. So when you have multi-age groups, it gives more security, sense of belonging. Looping where possible would be where one teacher can stay with learners for a longer period of time, a year, 2 years, moving with that class. And of course, we've said that attachments can be multiple. So among siblings, among learners, there could be groups that are formed where they really have those sense of belonging. And a sense of belonging and sense of security, and unconditional positive regard, just the very last thing. That basically means the approach that we have as adults, that I love you no matter what. It's not based on whether you get, you know, A's in your work, whether you get to be #1. Of course, in CBC, we're not talking about that kind of competition anymore. It doesn't matter whether you're quote unquote beautiful. I love you. You are worthy. You're a good person. We all need that. I need that. You need that. And children really, really need that kind of respect and honor. And all of those are what creates that healthy emotional environment that will support their learning.
Okay, so
well,
maybe
allow me just to interject and to ask a question, Naima. This goes to both Diane and Pritchard. Just wondering, when you talk about emotional and social development, I'm looking in a situation where perhaps a child is both emotionally and socially abused, what in quotes, at home, but the environment in school, because this is a school-going child, is completely different. I mean, there is a lot of support. As teachers, to try and remedy the situation, what is the best that the teachers can do? Maybe Pritchard?
Okay, thank you so much, Blaise, for that. As we normally interact with teachers, and we usually encourage teachers, being a teacher of early years is not just about teaching the concepts, but you wear so many hats, because teaching an emotionally and socially deprived child would actually not give the child the knowledge, skills, experiences, values, and attitudes that you'd want them to be. So an early years teacher needs to create a loving and conducive environment that would actually make the child feel so much secure and happy to come to school and be open. When Dan talked about secure attachment, this goes even up to the teachers, because a teacher is a caregiver to the child. So if the child feels confident to interact freely with the teacher, he would actually open up and share with the teacher the challenges that are happening. And equally, the teacher would actually single out and see when there is a behavior change. Because, like, for instance, a child who is socially and emotionally deprived from home, if he used to be so much talkative and interactive, he would first begin by withdrawing. So when people are going out, for example, to play with peers, he would actually opt to remain and just idle around without any interference. So if the teacher has created a great bond with these children, he or she would actually know how Moth behaves, how Diane behaves, how Blaise behaves, such that a little behavior change would actually trigger me to intervene and find out exactly what's happening. So I think Diane can actually top it up, but that is what we can share for now. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, thank you.
I wouldn't have a lot to add. I think that's very well answered, except that there could be instances where a teacher might need to reach out to the parents, to the home environment. You know, when we're aware of something, we're responsible for what we know. And if a child is open, as Moth has explained, you know, I know there are ethical issues, there are could be many issues involved, but where possible, bridge that gap. Try to see what can be done to really even bring to the awareness, if nothing else, of the parents, the importance of the foundation they're laying in a child's life.
Okay,
Right.
thank you, Diane.
So that basically means, so I'm saying that basically means that it is important for teachers to reach out to the parents, especially when they realize that there's something amiss in the children. Am I right, Diane?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And really, I would just like to appreciate the competence-based curriculum, because it has forced parents to reach out to the teachers, because there is that parental engagement activity that must come home every day. And also, this curriculum has really taken care of what we have just discussed, emotional and social development, because a lot of emphasis is put in pair work and group work. So when learners learn together, they really develop one another on these aspects we have discussed. So our viewers, listeners, and audience, we have just handled the topic, emotional and social development of a child. You have a question that you'd like to ask our panelists, you have a contribution that you'd like to add to this script, kindly write to us, and we shall really appreciate your effort. Now, we move on to our second subtopic of the day. This is intellectual development of a child. We really want to know how a child or a learner acquires knowledge and how this knowledge keeps on piling up. And the role of every one of us in helping this child acquire and develop this knowledge. So would like to ask Diane just to define to us, what is intellectual development or what is knowledge harvesting? Yeah. And then after you've done that, take us through whether these knowledge harvesting or intellectual development aids in the general growth of a learner or a child. Does it help us to grow? As in, are we different from what we were when we were 4 years? Okay, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Well, intellectual development, I think, is understood for the most part. It's cognitive and intellectual are terms that can be used interchangeably. It's about thinking. It's about thinking processes. So there are many, the initial thinking, elementary thinking processes would be just understanding basic concepts. Of course, we need to be able to concentrate. There are things related to memory and many other intellectual skills that are developed. So intellect is just about thinking. It's fairly simple.
Marifa.
Marifa, asante.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, and does it actually affect the general growth of a person? If someone's intellectual level grows, can we say that this person is growing? And if it doesn't grow, do we say that this person has stunted growth?
You're asking a very direct, maybe tricky question. I think we mentioned before that all aspects of development and growth are interrelated. So as you know, for the first conceptual developments now in the early years, a child can understand things that they see, things that are in front of them. We use the term concrete learning. They're concrete learners. You can't speak to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old about theoretical concepts or ideas that they can't really touch, feel, interact with. So in the initial stages, a child is a concrete learner. Piaget is one of the theorists who's very well known for theories of intellectual development in children. And he talks about 4 stages and a 5th one that's just for the geniuses somewhere that I don't know. But anyway, particularly in the school years, we have 4 stages. And the first one is just that, learning through the senses, learning through movement. It's the sensory motor stage. So a child's learning will hinge very much, their intellectual development will hinge very much on what opportunities are provided for them, as we mentioned earlier, to interact, to have physical touch, to feel things, to have that stimulating environment, even a rich language environment. So all these aspects are coming together. As they move forward, they'll begin to think abstractly, but that is particularly supported by the opportunity to use and manipulate and handle things, objects, play experiences that will help those concepts to develop. Piaget would emphasize, for example, that children can't talk about what they don't understand. They have to understand those things first, and they construct their own knowledge. In other words, we can't just teach a child by saying A, B, C, D, but they have to gain that for themselves, that knowledge for themselves through interacting with the environment. As they mature, maybe elementary years, the primary years into secondary years, they're much more able, because they've had the opportunity for physical manipulation or concrete manipulation, they're much more able to carry out mental manipulation, moving ideas around, relating ideas to each other, linking one idea to another, forming broader concepts out of the simple little ideas. But that's because they've been able to experience it practically, and that skill then is kind of absorbed mentally, and they can handle those kinds of tasks intellectually. Moth had mentioned nature and nurture, and of course that's something that we always look into in terms of development, human development, really. And nature and nurture both have a role. So some theorists would emphasize more, this is up to a child. The child is responsible for their own development. They have to construct their own knowledge. Other theorists would emphasize the social environment. And they're both crucial. They're both very important. Someone like Jerome Bruner talks about the social learning, the systems around a child. But even Bruner and Piaget and Montessori and many would agree that in the early years, it's about the active as in physical, sensory, hands-on experiences that a child has that really provide that foundation for intellectual development. I'll just share very quickly before we finish this particular section about the brain. I had mentioned that earlier. Our brains are a very complex, fascinating, amazing network of nerves. And it's interesting that in the early years, a child's brain is actually very, very, very active. Okay, these are images of brain cells, neurons, and the axons are the little balls at the end, and then they have places where they're branching out. Those are the dendrites, and where they actually meet one another to form those connections are called the synapses. So this is showing synapse formation. It's cut off a little bit, but it's gestation and then newborn, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. You see that the most intense neural connections are coming in about 2 years. And if there were a 3-year picture, it would probably be even more. So there's a lot of brain activity going on with these young children. Then as the neurons aren't used and the connections aren't needed, they start to fade. They start to actually disappear. And it's the stimulation, it's the rich environment, which Pritchard told us about way at the beginning, the rich stimulating environment that allows this intellectual development literally to take place. As information repeatedly goes across a neuron and the joining synapses and it goes, as it's repeated, with the neurologists say that those brain cells are hardwired. Now, it's not actually wires in the brain, but they become permanent so that information can be stored. It gets into long-term memory, and the skills that are acquired and the information that's acquired at that time is there for good. And that capacity to learn is really what we're looking to establish in those early years. We'll always learn more information. We'll always learn more knowledge. We'll always gain more, terminology and vocabulary. And right today, we're all learning together. We're still learning. But the capacity, the brain capacity to learn is to a large extent established in the first 6 years of life. And so it's through that rich stimulating, practical field or active environment that capacity can be developed.
Okay, thank you, Diane. You've really helped us understand how knowledge or how a child develops cognitively. And maybe if I've not gotten you wrong, you've said that very young learners, let's say at pre-primary, maybe and lower level of the primary school, they require concrete evidence or concrete stimuli to enable them learn better, if I've not gotten you wrong. So does that mean that the teacher for, let's say, pre-primary school and lower primary should always have the teaching resources that learners can interact with and get stimulated to learn? We just want to take this point home because we know majority of our audience are teachers and parents who are really handling children at that level.
Yes, sure. I mean, as much as possible. Yes, as much as possible. To have, it's our tendency, I think, to want to keep children quiet and controlled sometimes. And I'm not, of course, we need to be disciplined and controlled. And all of those are important. And yet they need to work it out. They need to to move and to explore and to experiment. You know, when a child is pouring water between glasses or arranging cups in the kitchen with mommy, or you know, they're actually experimenting and learning about volume and about seriation and sequence and shape, and it's all about having that opportunity. Yes.
And what opportunities, learning opportunities could we give to our mature learners, let's say upper primary and secondary school, because you know, these are the people that are really exposed to what we can call today passive learning, because they have the reading ability, and it is easy for the teacher to tell them, open this book, this page, do this exercise, and that is the lesson of the day. What advice can you give to our teachers and our parents who are nurturing children at that level?
We still talk about active learning.
Yes.
In active learning, we might not be necessarily referring to having pots and pans to handle and bang around with, or buttons to count. But active learning means that the learner is participating in the learning process, not just taking in information. I'll just share one slide in that regard. There's a Chinese proverb that we're probably familiar with. I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. So of course, in the early years, that doing might need to be actual active doing. But in, like you said, upper primary and even secondary school, learners are able to handle ideas. They're capable of abstract thought. So things like discussions, things like, you know, letting them write their experiences, sing about their experiences, create. There's a method known as, think, pair, share, and there's write, pair, share, where learners will you know, interact with other learners in the classroom. They'll get a chance to discuss what they're learning, maybe do their own research, you know, find out things for themselves rather than just listen to someone explaining, listen to a teacher explaining. Where possible, there can be laboratories, there can be just equipment that they can do to actually find out for themselves what things are about. But you asked about upper primary. Yeah, they can discuss, they can explore, they can have debates on certain topics, they can present their own positions or their own suggestions in the classroom. I'm sure that other participants would have ideas here as well. But it's about not just having to sit still and listen, because actually knowledge is not something that goes from my brain to yours.
Yeah.
Knowledge is something that I acquire. And differentiated learning would also speak to that, in the sense that one person might acquire through reading, person might acquire through dancing, one person might acquire through discussion, one person might acquire better through drawing, one person might, so we acquire that knowledge in different ways. But it's not like some kind of a magical line from my brain to yours. I need to acquire and understand and truly, you know, absorb. So we talk about Bloom's taxonomy. Of course, the higher levels of analysis and discovery would be important applications or important tools to integrate into that kind of learning context.
Okay. Thank you so much, Diane. I know our viewers and listeners have listened to that. And those of us who are teachers have acquired something that we are going to put into practice. Now, before Diane leaves us, or before we move on to the next session, Diane, you mentioned about Piaget. We know that these are great theories, and he's taught us a lot about the intellectual development of a learner or a child. And he tells us that children are born with the innate ability to learn. If we go by his proposition, it's that we are born ready to learn and we are in charge of our own learning. But is that enough? Is our innate ability enough, or we need to interact with the people in our society in order to learn enough?
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Naima. That's a very important question also. Yes, Piaget emphasized that children are in charge of their own learning, or they construct knowledge, their own knowledge.
Yeah.
But that's the nature, sorry, that's the nature emphasis. We also have nurture, and it needs to be balanced. And you know, many, I guess I would say in a simple answer, no, it's not enough.
Yeah,
the social
it's not
environment is also very important. The scaffolding, the support that teachers provide, that parents provide, very, very crucial in learning. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And maybe just to let us understand better, because we know that we have different learners, and still there are some other people who are experts in education who tell us that language is very important in learning, you know? Is it important for a learner to be exposed to a rich language environment for them to learn well? Will a language environment stimulate what Piaget says, and will it stimulate what Brunner and other theories of education say?
I would say definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, a rich language environment is very important. It's been shown statistically or through research that when learners grow up in an environment, even a home environment, where parents speak more, they use more words, leave alone whether they're intellectual words or simple words, but when they speak more, their language development is actually higher, or it shows up more. And some of the ways that we can provide a rich language environment, we probably know them by common sense, but at home or in the classroom, read to children, read with children. You know, when we read books, we experience other worlds that we wouldn't necessarily walk in our daily life. We experience new language patterns, and we also have time to spend with children, which is very important emotionally. So reading with children, singing with children, Pritchard mentioned that. We can
telling them stories.
And yeah, telling them stories, storytelling, listening to their stories. That's called child-directed speech. When you're actually letting a child take the lead and you listen to their stories, you might interject a little bit here and there, or, you know, give your comments, or maybe if they've said something that's really incorrect, you don't have to say that was wrong, but just say it, repeat it back correctly, because they're in that stage of learning. Let them talk about what they're doing, encourage, and that's where emotional stability comes in too, because if a child is confident in themselves and feels positive about themselves, they'll be much more likely to be willing to talk, be willing to share. And all of these things, I just want to give one final plug for bilingualism. It's a unique opportunity that we have in our beloved Kenya and in many African nations and many nations, but I think we should realize that some nations don't have that unique opportunity, because bilingualism has many, many positive effects in immediate learning and even later learning, and even old age. They're now finding that when people are bilingual as children, things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease are actually bilingualism fights those kinds of diseases, because our brains are more fluid, they're more flexible, they're better able to switch ideas, better at multitasking. So there's just many things that we can do to provide that rich language environment for learners. It's very important.
Okay, thank you, Diane.
Maybe Naima, I would add something on cognitive development. Diane has really done great, but just I would like to emphasize that for the parents and caregivers listening to us today, teachers would receive children at age 4 when they are joining PP1. But from the image of the brain, nerves, dendritic development that Diane shared, we realized that by age 3, the nerves are so much wired in quotes. So it calls upon the parents and caregivers right before children report to school to enhance effective early stimulation to ensure that by the time children are ready to join preschool, the brain's development has actually taken effect. This is very particular because many people would actually think about cognitive development at a point when children are in grade 8 or so, not realizing that a lot of damage would have happened when these children were at their formative ages. So if you look at, Diane, I wish you could project it again, just to explain a bit. At 6 months, a child in the mother's womb has got ability to hear.
Right.
So parents and caregivers, including fathers listening to me today, need to start singing for children while they are still in their mother's womb. It would help to wire the brain nerves, and by the time these children are born, yes, you can see by 6 months from the synapse formation, the level of development of the nerves is so much wired as it progresses through 2 years. Then from 4 years, you can see there is a lapse. So it means if we build from 6 months through 3 years, which we talk about as the first 1,000 days, then we will have actually tapped into the potential of these children so that we will have given them a trajectory to actually prosper and give additional support. Then the last thing I would like to add is that like for language development, Diane, I think did mention, or if she didn't, then I'll just cap it up in some reform. When children attain puberty, the brain starts now to narrow down in terms of picking and building on that. So a lot of your last question to Diane, which was asking about rich language environment, the more we build it at the formative years when the synapse formation is very high, is much effective as opposed to when you want to learn it at later stages when the brain now starts to kind of shrink, so in quote. Thank you.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you, Moth. Really, what I can take home today is that from day 1 to age 3 is the most crucial time for a parent to prepare that child so that when they go to school at age 4, they're well prepared emotionally, socially, and even cognitively, so that when they go to school, the neurons, the brain is prepared for learning. And when it comes to language, age 1 to age 9, according to the theories and scientists, is the most crucial moment for language development. And so as a teacher, as a parent, this is an opportunity, or this is a moment whereby you can really give your child storybooks, you can tell children stories, you can sing with your children in class, and do all that because you are building a reserve for this child to use going forward. Thank you so much. Our dear listeners and viewers, we have come to the end of our second session, and we still have one more session to go. We have looked at emotional development, social development of a learner. We have also looked at aspects of cognitive development of a learner or a child. And we really appreciate your patience and staying on with us up to this hour. And would like to tell you not to go away, because what is awaiting us is more interesting than what we have already covered. Now, I'd like to hand over this session to Blaise Mwangi, my colleague, so that he can take us through the next level of differentiated learning. How can we handle this? Blaise, are you there? Or you've gone to drink water? Okay, as we wait for Blaise to come, it is good for us to understand what differentiated learning is. And I would like Moth to take us through what is differentiated. We know the word differentiated is derived from different, okay? So do we have different learning approaches, or what does it mean? Kindly lead our audience.
Okay, thank you so much, Naima. Differentiated learning, it would build upon what Diane has discussed with us. When Diane was talking about intellectual development, we did realize that we have different intellects, and she mentioned about multiple intelligences. She did talk about Bloom's taxonomy. So each and every one of us, the way we acquire knowledge is not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And thus, therefore, calls for varied teaching approaches to ensure that every learner within the learning setting is catered for. So the ability to design learning to cater for all the different types of learners in a learning situation in the most basic terms would be defined as differentiated learning, taking into account all the learners and their learning styles and abilities within your learning context, and you design your teaching stroke learning approaches to meet the learning needs of every individual learner within your setting.
Now, both you've said that learners have got different learning styles or learning needs. Here I am a teacher. I'm a teacher in grade 3, handling a class of 60. How do I ensure that I meet the learning needs of all the 60 children? You know, how can I ensure that as a classroom teacher or as a parent? I'm doing homeschooling. Maybe I have 3. How can I ensure that I meet the need of Njeri, Omondi, Chebet, and so on? And they're different.
Thank you so much, Naima, for that question. Now, there are different strategies that an instructor, let me use the word instructor because that would either build upon a parent or a teacher. An instructor would actually use to effectively roll out these kind of processes to ensure everybody meets their own target. One is by grouping. You can do the grouping in terms of ability, in terms of interest. If I have a class of 60, for example, as you are saying, then there are specific learners who have got specific interest. Then that can be one directive that could guide me in terms of forming the same. Then 2, when Diane talked about Bloom's taxonomy, the Bloom taxonomy is like a tier system with those who have got the lower basic level of knowledge acquisition, the middle, and at the upper level. I could still use that in terms of grouping to ensure that the people who actually begin from the first level are given the tasks that they can effectively handle based on their cognitive level and level of interaction. Then I move to the second tier, and those who are at higher level are also designed. Through that, I would cater for every person, because if you design learning experiences which are similar to all of them, then those who are fast learners would actually get bored and start disturbing the ones who are still struggling. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pritchard. There you're telling us that there are several approaches that a teacher can use in order to meet the learning needs of all the learners in the classroom. Blaise, I would like you to continue from there.
Okay, my question will still go back to Moth. Moth, I'm aware you've also been involved in writing for the new curriculum. I'm more concerned about the competence-based curriculum. And I would like you, just in a nutshell, tell us what has changed. Our children used to go to kindergartens, to early childhood education centers earlier on, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Now we have something different that is happening. What has changed? What has really changed?
Thank you so much, Blaise, for that wonderful question. It's nice for us to learn together and know the changes which have taken place. When we talk about competence-based curriculum, vis-a-vis, I call it the old curriculum, one key thing that has transformed is that parents have got a real involvement in this new curriculum. CBC, as it is, has got a tripartite link. When I talk about tripartite link, the teacher is at one corner, the children or the child is at one apex, and then the parent is at one aspect. So if we remove one of them, they're like the cooking stones. If you remove one of them, then your sufuria will not actually get your food done. Yes. So if the parent sends a child to school, it is the teacher's role to ensure that the child acquires knowledge at his or her own pace. Then the teacher would actually learn together with, not facilitating learning to the child, but they learn together. Because there is a bit which Diane mentioned about scaffolding, supporting learning. Children can scaffold as well as adults still scaffold children. So it is that mutual linkage between the child and the parents. Now, when the child comes back home, the child comes with a task that the teacher has sent. So the parent also follow through based on what the child is able to learn. Then the second thing, which is more important under CBC, and that's why it is called competence-based curriculum, there is a lot more emphasis on competencies. And competency is usually defined as the ability to apply appropriate knowledge and skills to effectively perform a function. So it is not just learning for the sake of going to school and copying notes. Then you come back home, as we were used to be asked, what did you learn today? Then parents know that learning is about copying notes. So it is not about the exact number of pages that the children copied from the blackboard, but it lays more emphasis on 7 key critical competencies that the teacher aims at building in children. One of them is in terms of helping children to acquire critical thinking and problem-solving abilities, which can be so much tapped at the early years. Then 2, we talk about creativity and imagination. At that formative age, from what Diane shared with us in brain development, the social aspect, we know very well that children are very creative. And this, when really tapped or harnessed it at the formative years, it gives children an opportunity to think beyond. They will become innovators, not just people who are passive listeners to the teacher, as in the initial phase. Then we talk about self-efficacy, which is very key under CBC, because self-efficacy falls under the broad spectrum of life skills. When I break it further, things to do with like self-awareness, ability of the child to understand his or her strength at that formative age, building his or her self-esteem would actually come in handy. Plus many more like digital literacy, learning to learn, all the 7 core concepts. So a lot has changed in terms of instruction, and it is more of focus onto the child. The child is at the center of learning. We normally talk about CBC encourages child-centered approach. So thank you.
All right. Now, going back, having explained to that, thank you very much, Pritchard. I think it's slightly clearer, but you know, parents will still ask you when you are told that something has changed. As a parent, as a teacher, you'll ask, what is it that has changed? Because when the child goes, I'm still expecting him to come and tell me 1 + 1 is 2. Come and when I show him a color and I ask him which color is this, he's going to tell me it's color green if it is color green. So those are the little things that I would want you to explain to particularly the listeners and the viewers. What makes me different? Because I was also taught, has the content changed or is it the method of teaching that has changed? Now, if it is the method that has changed, what do we expect as the outcome? So how can I compare my child who went to nursery, because those days you were called nursery, or even myself, I went to nursery those many years back. Yes. How am I different from my little child who's now in PP1 or PP2, who's going through the new curriculum in terms, because that's what the parents, that's what some of the teachers are also wondering. so that we can see, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? Kindly try and crunch that in a layman's language.
Thank you so much, Blaise. That's very interesting. I'll try to break it down because of the time allocation that we have for the presentation. But one thing I would like to state is this: change is inevitable. I want to bring our listeners' attention. I grew back in the early 80s when I was young. And back then, the vehicles that were in Kenya never had preset radio systems in them. Right today, when you buy or you import a vehicle, it comes fully with an installed radio system. So that means there is some development which has happened in the automotive industry. I attended nursery school equally, but by then the teachers used to teach us A for apple, B for ball, C for cat, D for dog. A lot has happened and research has been done, and it has been found that I would refer to it as rudimentary method of teaching children how to read. They've encouraged us to use phonics method, where instead of talking about A for apple, I would talk about A for apple. And the A sound would actually remain constant, whether it is in a Gikuyu language, Luo language, Giriama, Pokomo. So the child can actually relate this particular sound to whenever he or she spots it in any written word from whichever language it is. So the outcomes that we are looking into, because the outcome in itself is a very long-term goal which cannot be achieved in a short while.
True, true.
For example, the children who are in PP1 today, this year, or who will be joining PP1 next year, we normally talk about the outcomes when they reach grade 3. So we'll be looking at what would they have achieved by the time they reach grade 3. That will be after 5 years. And one of them we talk about by the end of the early years education, which will be at grade 3, they should be able to have acquired or built literacy and numeracy skills. So when we talk about that in the layman's language, at PP1, we would introduce the concept of number work, which builds numeracy by simple things. For example, you've mentioned sorting cups, or grouping things according to color. When they transit to grade 1, then the tasks become a little bit higher as per their cognitive level, as Diane did mention, then through up to grade 3. But now when they transit to grade 4, they will have joined another level in terms of their mental development, which they will not be as compared to the learners who did not actually benefit from attending this particular fora. So there is a lot of build-up, and there is a lot of children manipulating tasks in a CBC class. I've interacted with a number of teachers through training forums, and what they tell you is it is more children are learning. There is learning taking place, because in CBC, the role of the teacher or a parent is simply to facilitate the learning. Then the child acts upon the learning environment in terms of manipulating materials, taking full charge of the learning. So there is more of knowledge, language, skill, and value acquisition as opposed to the initial one. And just maybe to mention one before I return back the program to you. You realize that with the new curriculum, we have infused values, and values are very important to us as a family. When we talk about aspect to do with social aspect, emotional aspect, values play a very key role. And in CBC lessons, values are also given a lot of focus, because you may be someone who is very, very good in terms of academic performance, yes, but your values are wanting. You will not lead any life worth its value. So children are taught from that basic level. Then for parents, I know they've been stressing so much on my child should be number 1, my child should be number 2. I want to bring to their attention, grading children at the formative years do not actually yield much result. Diane is an expert, and she's also done a lot of research with children. We know that at the early years of development, girls' language acquisition level is higher as compared to boys. So if you give girls an opportunity to compete with boys in terms of language acquisition, then definitely girls will take the lead. It doesn't mean that now boys in that particular aspect are intellectually deprived. That would not actually work. Then 2, I usually ask people this question. If today, Blaise, you pick your child from your rural setup, You bring him to Nairobi, where in the rural setup, the language of interaction he or she is used to is the mother tongue or the language of the context. Then he lands in Nairobi and the language of instruction is either English or Swahili. When the teacher instructs the child or the child is given an assessment to undertake in a language they don't understand, they'll actually not perform. Not because they are stupid, but because of language barrier. So there are so many factors that play a key role. And this is what CBC is trying to break, that barrier, so that every child learns at his or her own pace and develops to their fullest potential. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. I think this now enlightens me quite a bit. Now, in my own words, I think you're telling me that perhaps myself, when I was in school, the teacher assumed I didn't know anything. And so basically, the teacher's job was to pump me in and get stuff inside me. Whereas,
Absolutely.
as you speak now, you're telling me that the teacher wants to find out what it is that I know, and then they try to improve on that. Am I right when I say that?
You are very right, because
Okay.
when you are instructing in a CBC class, then you first, basically, it should be the practice. When you meet me as your pupil, whether I'm young or old, don't assume I do not know, that you are the only one who knows. I may know more than even you, the teacher. I usually use this example. Your child or my child may have had an opportunity to board a plane, whereas his or her teacher has not had the chance. The far they've gone is having a tour to the airport and they've reached at the wire mesh and waved at an aeroplane. So between my child and the teacher, who can talk more about an aeroplane? It is my child. So if the teacher is talking about means of transport, for instance, and one means of transport is an aeroplane, then the teacher would benefit more from my child explaining and talking about an aeroplane rather than the teacher remotely thinking of what an aeroplane looks like. So in such a scenario, the teachers are supposed to probe, does anyone or has any one of us ever had an opportunity to board an aeroplane? Then from there, the teacher now builds from that knowledge. So that is what we encourage in terms of teaching. I'll use an example for parents, because maybe parents may be asking themselves, that is for the teachers. There are homes where people, when food is presented on the table, they don't give thanks to the Lord. People scramble for food. So children, because of socialization, that's how they've been brought up, that when food is served, we just eat. There is no opportunity to take a second and thank God for provision which he has given us. Now, when they come to school and they meet me as their teacher, I have to tell them that before we eat, we have to take a moment and pray. Now, the child will carry this home and tell me, Dad or Mom, teacher says before we eat, we have to pray. So the child will have transformed the habit from their home. He's from ECD, but he's transformed their parents who are much way older and siblings, then the family starts to pray. So it is a win-win situation. A child will teach adults and adults will equally teach the child based on the level of experiences which they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think this becomes quite enlightening. I don't know whether we still have Diane with us.
Sure.
Because I would also want, you're around, eh? This is generally for both of you, because, and it's out of just a concern, and I'm talking as a parent and on behalf of many parents and even teachers, because we now have COVID here with us. We are going to the following year. As it stands now today, is that we were told that perhaps there will be no movement to the next class. And I'm assuming that I have a child who is turning 3 towards the end of the year. They are supposed to join PP1 next year. And the PP1s who were there at the beginning of the year will still have to continue with PP1 because they had not learned by the time Corona came. Again, we are told we need to emphasize a lot more on social distances. social distancing rather. In your opinion, both you and Moth, what do you foresee coming next year when children want to get into schools, others have not gone through that system? Is there a likelihood that there will be a clash? Is there a likelihood that we'll have all the children joining pre-primary moving forward? And is there a danger?
Blaze,
Yes.
asking us to not only be God, but also to be the government and the KICD all rolled into one to answer these questions. I mean, okay, I think many things could happen. There could be many different scenarios. As at now, things are still very uncertain. I feel that it's important because one of the things that we have talked about is the emotional stability of our children, and particularly young children. As much as possible, we need to be talking to them or helping them work through. This can be very traumatic, actually. It can be very traumatic for those young children. Their lives have been turned upside down. Their routines are totally changed. And as much as we as adults don't know what to expect, they also don't know what to expect. So I think in whatever is going to come and whatever is going to happen, which we really don't know at this point, let's be there for them. Let's talk through things with them. Let's assure them that all will be well. Let's help them to get through this very, very turbulent time, really, for the nation, but also for themselves as learners. And as much as possible, fill in the gaps. I mean, I think what we've talked about today is, as parents, the ways in which we can fill in the gaps, the ways in which we can continue keeping them learning, and how they'll figure out which years follow which, and how the schedule will go. They can continue learning. They don't have to miss a beat. If they've missed 6 months and they're behind schedule, I think by the time they're graduating from secondary or finishing their secondary education, it won't have made that much difference, as long as we're able to just keep them assured, keep them, keep them learning, and keep them confident that things are going to be okay. That would be my.
Okay, thank you, Diane. So remedy for that. In fact, the reason why I was asking is because now, in the event that there's a difficulty in joining pre-primary school, and you have told us before that there are certain ages when some of the what I would call psychomotor skills are required. That's sometimes when you are developing your finger muscles at a certain age, eye-hand coordination, concentration span. How best can a parent try and mitigate now that their children may not be in school, they have not been in school, and there's a likelihood, although we don't know again, that come next year, there could be those challenges. What would you encourage the parents to do at home with their children?
Okay. Thank you so much, Blaise, for the question. I'll respond to the latter one. The former one has been handled so well by Diane, because we can't speak on behalf of the government and KICD. Now, there are lots of things that parents can do jointly together with their children. We usually talk about no cost or low cost materials. And I'll emphasize a lot more on no cost. No cost means there is no amount of money being spent to purchase resources to enhance this, to support learning and acquisition of basic skills. Or even if the money is spent, then it is on very minimal amounts just to aid. Because majority, when people talk about stimulating early learning experiences of children, then people would actually first by questioning themselves, so where would I get the amount to go and purchase one or two things? I want to bring to parents' attention on this. At home, we have, like, for example, no, you can never miss a matchbox in every homestead. So once the matchsticks have been used, what usually happens, people usually throw the matchboxes. They can improvise and make simple telephone calls. The simple telephone calls would actually encourage language development because the children would be conversing, the one which is usually made using a thread tied in between with a stick. So one places it on the ear, the other person speaks, and then they interchange like that. We have got sticks around, especially in rural communities. They can shape them with a key mandate, which I would emphasize, is safety. Any material which they use, safety should be paramount before they think of it. So if for the sticks, for example, they can trim them so nicely, they ensure that they don't have any sharp edges that can prick the children, then through that, children can order them in terms of, they can have them in terms of different lengths, so they can order them according to sizes, either from you, they instruct the children, I would like you to arrange them from the tallest to the smallest, or from the smallest to the tallest. They could also ask children to form patterns using seeds. Seeds are everywhere. People cook maybe using beans, maize. They can ask children, now let's place three maize seeds, follow it with 2 bean seeds, just to make some form of pattern work that would actually help. Then when it comes to like counting, we normally talk about the basics like rote counting, where children just, they can sing along together with children. Every parent has, they know some number songs which they can sing, either in their vernacular or English songs, or they can get downloadable versions from the YouTube, which are child friendly for children to listen to that. They could also engage, like we have a concept of money at the PP2 level. So children at that particular level, they would learn about the denominations that we have with a lot of ease. We use money in our everyday life. They can be involved in terms of preparing their own simple budgets. They can be told, we have 10 shillings. This is some plan for your 10 shillings. That would actually help children to identify those. Then bringing different denominations at home, asking children, how much is this? If they don't get it right, then let them not beat the children. Let them teach them in a child-friendly manner. This is 10 bob, this is 100 shilling note, this is 50 shilling note, and stuff like that. But that also needs to be done with moderation, because I've seen parents who want to instruct their children up to know how to count up to 100 or up to 1,000, but their level cannot actually accommodate that. So we need also to work together with parents through sensitization programs and advise them that, for example, if they are in PP1, then that is around 3 to 4 years old, or 4 to 5 maximum, then we need also to train them. They can count concretely and various items and commodities up to around 9 concrete, so that they will not only know that when you talk about 9, maybe there are 9 cups. So they could be 9 cups, 9 sticks, 9 stones, and stuff like that. So I think I would leave it at that particular level and invite Diane to make a contribution.
Those are amazing suggestions. Very, very, very helpful. Even things like sorting out different things in the house, involving children in what's happening in daily life, involve them in, of course, safety is always paramount, very, very important, but involve them in cooking, involve them in spreading Blue Band on the bread, or creating a fruit salad, involve them in teach dressing and undressing skills, teach daily life skills, all of these, just involving those children, those learners, see them as learners even in the home, involving them in the daily life activities. Yeah, it can all that will enhance their learning and keep them up to speed, or will have provided just as much perhaps as they would have gained in school. Discussing, we talked about that, stories. There's so much that can be done to keep those young ones ready and in a rich learning environment.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you, Richard. I want to take this opportunity to take it back to Naima before I make my closing remarks. Naima, anything?
Okay, I would like to thank you all for your great contributions towards making teaching and learning better and better than what it has been before. Thank you so much, Richard, for bringing forth approaches that teachers and parents can use in order to address all the needs of the learners in their class. And from that, I just got one thing, that whenever a teacher employs different teaching approaches, you are using group work or team activities, involving learners in manipulating, involving learners in singing and dancing, you are involving them in writing, reading, eventually they're exploring the environment. Eventually you don't need to struggle with what to do in order to develop the 7 competencies. They will come out automatically. Manipulation and exploration, critical thinking, creativity is just developed like that. So I would urge our teachers, as we go back to school, it is good that the government is opening up schools in the next month. In October, we shall be going back to school. Kindly continue with the good work you are doing. Let us employ as many teaching approaches as possible so that at the end of the day, this holistic learner will be developed. Thank you, Blaise. I would like, looking at the time, we are supposed to be winding up, and I would like to hand it over back to you so that you can give us a closing remarks and end this meeting successfully.
All right. Thank you, Naima. I'm so delighted. I'm so excited to have listened to the presenters, particularly our 2 presenters, Pritchard and Diane. I initially took a risk and called them brilliant minds. I'm so proud because they have not disappointed the audience. They're actually brilliant minds, and we have learned a lot, and I want to believe even the viewers and the listeners have learned quite a lot from them. I just want to inform the viewers that we had said that these are also authors. They have written books. I'm proud and delighted to tell you that Diane Mundy has written an important book, and I'm sure that's where she must have gotten a lot of her presentation notes today. She's the author of this book called Early Childhood, Amazing First Years. And this is a beautiful book which talks about almost everything that she was talking to us. It gives information about physical growth and development, intellectual growth of young children. It talks about social development, emotional development, things about acquisition of language, and many other things. And I would encourage parents, I would encourage teachers. This is a beautiful resource for teachers. So I encourage you to ensure that you get your copy and make sure that you find this book. Diane has also written some books. She's the author of some CBC materials for preschool. She's the author of First Step series alongside Pritchard Moth. This is a First Step mathematics activity. This is a course book for children, the younger one. So there's PP1 and PP2. We have mathematical activity, language activities, and environmental activities. And between the 2, they are the authors, and we are proud that they chose to publish with Moran Publishers. We have many books, even as parents stay at home. Other resources, those of you who can afford, we have workbooks, which children can use with minimum supervision, things about coloring, things about understanding. We also have books that we call the First Step. These are workbooks, and the workbooks will also help you. And there are many. If you look at our catalog, you'll be able to find the range of our ECD materials, which I believe would be of great use to all of you viewers, to all of you listeners, and you'll be able to keep your children engaged with minimal supervision. If you're a busy parent, we understand you have to go. There are a lot of things that you have to do so that you are able to get enough for your children. So as long as you have somebody elderly who can, or some grown-up who can be able to give instructions, then you'll be able to use these books adequately. You can purchase these books from our website, where you will get a shopping cart. If you log into our website, www.moranpublishers.com, you'll get into a shopping cart and you can be able to select all the books that we have, whatever it is that you want, including the books that I've shown you. And you can pay comfortably from the comfort of your home or office or wherever you are, or through your phone. And then books will be delivered to your doorstep. Wherever you are in this country, we are going to deliver your books within 2 or 3 days. So you can be able to get these books. However, in case you are near a bookshop that stocks these books, you can walk in and ensure that you get your copies. I want to thank Naima for allowing me to be part and parcel of this presentation. Thank you for guiding us through. And once again, thank you for the panelists. Thank you, viewers. We wish you all the best. In case you have any questions, you can chat with us. We are live at the Nairobi International Virtual Book Fair. So you can log in and get into our booth and talk to us and interact with us and ask us as many questions as possible. Asante sana, and may God bless all of you. Thank you.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can. Personally, I can hear you.
Yes.
Thank you.